Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Apa kabar teman-teman semua? Semoga dalam keadaan sehat walafiat. Amin. Dalam video kali ini saya ingin mereaksi sebuah video dari Indonesia dokumenter mengenai Indonesia, nikel versus Uni Eropa, di mana Indonesia dituntut di WTO ya oleh Uni Eropa. Dan gimana videonya? Kita langsung simak saja video berikut ini. Gasken!
What does this nickel focus mean actually more broadly?
According to the United States Geological Survey, global nickel production reached 3.3 million metric tons in 2022, with Indonesia being the world's largest nickel producer. Its total production is estimated to reach 1.6 million metric tons, contributing 48.48% to the total global nickel production throughout last year. But Indonesia recently dropped a bombshell by putting the brakes on exporting raw nickel ore.
Pemerintah secara resmi melarang ekspor biji nikel pada awal tahun 2020, lebih cepat dari ketentuan relaksasi ekspor sebelumnya di 2022.
Now, you might be scratching your head, wondering, what's the big deal? Well, here's the lowdown. Nickel is like the MVP of many industries, from stainless steel to electric vehicles. It's the stuff that keeps the gears turning. Europe's booming automotive industry, charging full speed ahead into the electric vehicle revolution. And nickel is the crucial ingredient in those sleek EV batteries that we all love to rave about. Without a steady supply, production could grind to a screeching halt, leaving carmakers in the lurch and consumers feeling the pinch. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The ripple effects of this nickel ban could send shockwaves across multiple sectors, spelling trouble for Europe's economic stability.
There is a strong demand for particularly nickel ore coming from the EU to Indonesia, and the current ban is hurting our firms, particularly the steel.
But hold on to your hats, because there's more to this story. Beyond the automotive industry, nickel plays a pivotal role in everything from aerospace to construction. It's the backbone of so many essential products and processes that we often take for granted. With
Fun guys.
With Indonesia tightening its grip on nickel exports, Europe is facing a potential supply crunch that could reverberate far and wide. So, brace yourselves, because we're about to uncover about the Indonesia's nickel ban policy and how it impacted European economy. But before we continue, please push the subscribe button first. Let's go to 10,000 subscribers this month, and I will make an interesting video about the new Nusantara capital for you. Now let's continue to the deeper discussion.
Oke guys, sebelum lanjut ya, jangan lupa subscribe, follow, dan komen ya. Boleh juga di-share sebanyak-banyaknya. Kalau kalian suka, boleh juga donate super thanks ya. Terima kasih banyak untuk support channel saya. Nah, tadi sempat dibahas juga ya kenapa Indonesia melarang ekspor nikel, karena yang diekspor itu nikel ore ya. Nikel ore atau raw material atau material mentahnya kita jual dengan harga murah. Tadi ada orang dia bilang dengan larangnya ekspor nikel Indonesia menyakiti perusahaan kami. Loh, perusahaan kami ini negara, situ perusahaan ya. Penting mana negara sama perusahaan? Penting negara Indonesia, men. Jangan beli dengan harga murah ya, jangan beli mentahnya aja. Lanjut. Modern kolonialisme. Kenapa orang naik sepeda ya?
For centuries, European colonial powers sought to exploit the resources of their colonies for their own gain. They established trade relationships that heavily favored the extraction and export of raw materials, often at the expense of the indigenous populations. this pattern of exploitation laid the groundwork for modern colonialism, where economic dominance and resource extraction remain central themes. Indonesia, with its vast natural wealth, has long been a target for resource extraction by European nations. Start with Portuguese from 1509 to 1595, Spain from 1521 to 1692, Dutch from 1602 to 1942, French from 1806 to 1811, British from 1811 to 1816, and Japan from 1942 to 1945. From the colonial era to the present day, Indonesia has been pressured to export raw materials like nickel, coal, and timber to satisfy the voracious appetite of European industries. This lopsided relationship has perpetuated a cycle of dependency and economic subjugation, where Indonesia is relegated to the role of a mere supplier of raw materials. Take nickel, for example. Indonesia is the world's biggest producers of nickel ore, a vital component in the production of stainless steel and electric vehicle batteries. European industries rely heavily on Indonesian nickel to fuel their manufacturing processes and maintain their competitive edge in the global market. However, this reliance comes at a cost to Indonesia, which often receives low prices for its raw materials and sees little benefit from their value-added production elsewhere. President Joko Widodo at the State Palace in Jakarta on Friday, December 2, 2022, said, "Be careful. In the past, during the VOC era, there was something called forced labor, and there was also something called forced cultivation. In this modern era, forced exports have emerged, a new way of colonialism that we are forced to export." The pressure to export raw materials to Europe has had profound implications for Indonesia's economy and environment. While European industries reap the rewards of Indonesian nickel, local communities bear the brunt of environmental degradation and social upheaval caused by mining operations. Moreover, Indonesia's economy remains vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices, leaving it at the mercy of external forces beyond its control.
Of Indonesia, a gavel or a hammer, if you want. This was a symbolic gesture, of course, in view of Indonesia taking over officially the presidency in 2023. So I now invite...
This unequal relationship underscores the persistence of modern colonialism, where power imbalances and economic exploitation continue to shape global trade dynamics. European countries, with their economic might and historical legacy, wield significant influence over resource-rich nations like Indonesia, dictating terms and extracting wealth to sustain their own prosperity.
Oh my God, are we dead?
Fucking God!
What just happened?
What happened?
Iklan, guys.
This thing is almost...
However, the tide may be turning. With the rise of economic nationalism and calls for greater resource sovereignty, countries like Indonesia are beginning to push back against the forces of modern colonialism. Initiatives like Indonesia's nickel ban signal a growing desire to assert control over its resources and demand fair treatment in the global marketplace.
Bahwa kemitraan kita tidak semuanya baik-baik saja. Banyak perbedaan yang harus kita selesaikan. Oleh sebab itu, jika ingin kita membangun sebuah kemitraan yang lebih baik, maka kemitraan harus didasarkan pada kesetaraan.
Betul.
Tidak boleh ada pemaksaan.
No.
Tidak boleh lagi ada pihak yang selalu mendikte dan beranggapan bahwa my standard is better than yours.
No. Nickel Bear.
price of nickel ore has surged to a 5-year high, and it comes after the world's largest nickel producer, Indonesia, announced an export ban of the raw commodity from as early as January next year, 2 years earlier than it had planned.
Indonesia's nickel ban policy isn't just about economics. It's a bold move aimed at reclaiming control over its own natural resources.
Yes.
For decades, Indonesia has been a major exporter of raw materials, including nickel, to fuel the industries of developed nations, primarily in Europe. However, this dynamic often perpetuates a power imbalance, where wealthy nations dictate terms and exploit the resources of less developed countries. Enter modern colonialism. Historically, colonial powers like European nations wielded immense influence over their colonies, extracting resources for their own benefit while leaving the locals with the short end of the stick. Fast forward to today, and we see echoes of this exploitative relationship in the global trade of raw materials. European countries, among others, have long relied on cheap imports of raw materials from countries like Indonesia to fuel their industries and maintain their economic dominance. But here we ban the export of nickel because we want to create as many job opportunities as possible in our country. That's the goal, said Jokowi during the annual meeting of Bank Indonesia on Wednesday, November 24, 2021. Indonesia's nickel ban represents a seismic shift in this narrative. By halting the export of raw nickel ore, Indonesia is asserting its sovereignty and reclaiming control over its resources. This move challenges the status quo and sends a clear message that the days of being a mere supplier of raw materials are over. It's a bold step towards economic self-determination and breaking free from the shackles of modern colonialism.
Apakah membuat Bapak makin optimistis bahwa hilirisasi yang selama ini menjadi program penting itu bisa dilakukan dan akan sukses?
Loh, sudah berjalan gimana sih? Nikel sudah berjalan. Smelter sudah kebanyakan malah menurut saya.
Now let's talk about the implications for European countries. With Indonesia closing its doors to nickel exports, European industries that rely heavily on this vital resource are feeling the heat. Suddenly, they're faced with the prospect of having to source nickel from other, potentially more expensive, markets or invest in domestic extraction and refining capabilities. Either way, the days of easy access to cheap raw materials may be coming to an end, challenging the economic model that has long sustained European prosperity. The European Union has filed a lawsuit against Indonesia to the World Trade Organization, or WTO, over Indonesia's nickel export ban, which took effect on 1st of January 2021.
So you guys know Indonesia is doing protectionism and it's working, right? So in recent years, Indonesia has forbidden the export of nickel, a key component in electric cars, electrification more generally, one of those commodities that's about to be in a lot of demand. And Indonesia said, can't export it without processing it. You can take it out of the country if you invest in processing into its next, step up the value chain in Indonesia. Indonesia's gotten in a lot of trouble for this. The World Trade Organization has censured them to some degree. I'm not sure what stage of penalties that involves. The EU brought a case against them. But Indonesia isn't blinking. They're just going to keep going forward. And
the export ban aims to give added values to nickel, meaning that nickel will not be exported in the form of raw ore. Indonesia has imposed a ban on nickel export as stipulated in the Law No. 3/2020 on mineral and coal, meaning that nickel must be processed in Indonesia's smelters before being sold overseas.
If you're a business owner, then animated explainer videos are the best way to capture attention, get more followers, and drive more.
Our policy regarding the downstreaming of nickel will continue, even though we are taken to the WTO by the European Union. It's okay. This is our nickel. It's from our own country's land, said President Jokowi in CEO Forum on November 18, 2021. Beyond the economic ramifications, Indonesia's nickel ban also shines a light on the broader issue of resource sovereignty. It prompts us to question the ethics of a global trade system that perpetuates inequalities and exploits the natural wealth of developing nations. By asserting control over its nickel resources, Indonesia is asserting its right to determine the terms of engagement and insisting on fair treatment in the global marketplace. At the end of the day, Indonesia's nickel ban policy serves as a wake-up call for European countries and the world at large. It challenges the entrenched dynamics of modern colonialism and calls for a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. As we navigate the complexities of a globalized economy, it's essential to recognize the agency and sovereignty of nations like Indonesia and work towards a more just and sustainable future for all.
Yes. From the land to its own people.
Kita mau tarung apapun, kita ini kan hentikan ekspor nikel or keluar. Ini sudah digugat sama Uni Eropa, gugat di WTO. Barang-barang kita, nikel kita, mau kita ekspor, mau enggak kan suka-suka kita.
Indonesia's ban on exporting raw materials heralds a new era where the country takes control of its destiny, putting an end to the vestiges of modern colonialism. With this bold move, Indonesia is reclaiming sovereignty over its rich natural resources, ensuring they benefit its own people rather than fueling the industries of foreign nations. Foreign companies, faced with the ban on exporting raw materials, are compelled to rethink their manufacturing strategies. Many are now considering moving their manufacturing industries to Indonesia to gain access to the abundant raw materials within the country.
Kerjakan di sini dan nilai tambah itu ada di dalam. Selain itu juga muncul yang namanya lapangan pekerjaan. Seperti di sini 27.000 tenaga kerja yang bisa.
China, for example, has been more cooperative with Indonesia's nickel export ban policy compared to the European Union, which has taken Indonesia to the WTO. It seems that China supports Indonesia's desire to advance its nation, as evidenced by the numerous Chinese companies relocating their factories to Indonesia.
Presiden Joko Widodo mengungkapkan akan ada potensi relokasi pabrik-pabrik dari China sebanyak 119 perusahaan. Dan saat ini Indonesia sudah kelimpahan relokasi pabrik dari China, Jepang, dan Korea.
This shift represents a seismic change in the global economic landscape as Indonesia emerges as a prime destination for investment and industrial development. As foreign companies establish manufacturing facilities in Indonesia, they bring with them capital, technology, and expertise that can catalyze economic growth and create employment opportunities for the Indonesian people. This influx of investment has the potential to transform local communities, stimulating economic activity and improving living standards across the country. During an event, President Jokowi stated that by simply stopping the export of raw nickel, our export revenue has increased from the initial value of only 17 trillion rupiahs. Now it can reach 360 trillion rupiahs in a year. Moreover, the establishment of manufacturing industries in Indonesia fosters technology transfer and skills development among the local workforce. As Indonesian workers gain exposure to advanced manufacturing processes and technologies, they acquire valuable skills that enhance their employability and contribute to the nation's human capital development. The benefits of foreign investment in Indonesia extend beyond the realm of economics. By attracting foreign companies to set up manufacturing operations within its borders, Indonesia strengthens its position as a regional economic powerhouse and enhances its geopolitical influence on the world stage. This newfound influence empowers Indonesia to shape global trade dynamics and assert its interests in international forums. Importantly, the localization of manufacturing industries in Indonesia contributes to the diversification of the country's economy and reduces its reliance on raw material exports. By shifting towards value-added production and industrialization, Indonesia builds a more resilient and sustainable economic foundation that is less susceptible to external shocks and market fluctuations. In conclusion, Indonesia's ban on exporting raw materials marks a turning point in the nation's history, signaling the end of modern colonialism and the dawn of a new era of economic empowerment and self-determination. By attracting foreign investment and fostering industrial development within its borders, Indonesia harnesses its rich natural resources for the benefit of its own people, paving the way for sustainable growth, prosperity, and inclusive development.
Gas. Oke guys ya, kesimpulan. Pertama jangan lupa untuk subscribe ya. Nah, saya mau simpulkan di sini. Jadi memang untuk bahan nikel itu kita ekspor mentah sama Pak Presiden Jokowi. Nikel kita, barang-barang kita, ekspor suka-suka kita ya. Dan tujuannya untuk menarik untuk menjual dengan harga lebih tinggi, diolah, diproses di Indonesia. Nikel mentahnya diolah, menarik investasi asing dan menarik perusahaan-perusahaan asing untuk memulai produksinya di Indonesia ya. Nah, strategi jangka panjangnya akan kelihatan dengan masuknya relokasi banyak-banyak strategi yang dipikirkan ulang ya. Perusahaan-perusahaan manufaktur luar negeri banyak masuk ke Indonesia untuk mendapatkan akses bahan nikel ya dan bahan-bahan lain tentunya ya. Dan ini membuat sebuah shifting, sebuah pergeseran ya, pergeseran di mana Indonesia menunjukkan kekuatannya secara ekonomi ya, secara bahan mentah. Dan saya sebagai rakyat Indonesia berada di belakang presiden ya. Saya dukung keputusan presiden, lawan terus ya, pantang mundur. Oke guys. Demikian video kali ini. Semoga bermanfaat ya. Semoga kita lawan terus neokolonialisme ini. Ya, jangan lupa like, subscribe, dan komen. Terima kasih banyak. Sampai jumpa di kesempatan berikutnya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.